Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good middle of the day. Hi, Wendy. So I want to thank everybody for coming out. I have a strong belief that it's more about the person to my right than me that you're here to hear from. So let me be very quick. I know it. So to set the stage, what's going to happen is I'm going to give you an introduction that will utterly amaze you. Thank you. The president will come up, try and top me. And then what we'll do is we'll hand it back such that I can facilitate a discussion, because today is supposed to be hearing from you on what are the things that we can do around this campus, this community. And note that I specifically say community because it doesn't just have to be about this campus. What are the things that we can do online to build our community with our students, our faculty, our staff, and increase the engagement? So while we might have, and I will come back and talk a little bit about the next building, because space is but one component talking about the design features, we want to talk to you about way more. It is about the pedagogy and how we look at learning for the future. It is about the activities that we run for our students, our faculty, our staff. So we want to hear from you on all of those. In the message out, it said from the president that he has challenged us to think about how we can provide flexible space that supports our teaching and research mission while enhancing student, faculty, and staff engagement, so our campus is a place where people want to stick around. It is that idea of sticking around, of increasing engagement, that we wanted to talk to you about today and hear from you. What we have in front of us today, on the first row, are people of the design team looking at the space components. Again, this is just the space components. We're here to listen to you, but we expect the discussion to be much more than just about space. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr.
Okay, thank you. Wow, good crowd. Am I mic'd? Can you hear me? The feedback is enormous. Hi, folks. So you can hear me, that's great. So what a wonderful town hall where we get to talk about space and we get to think about what does the campus of the future look like. And I find that really exciting because we're a technological university. We need to be thinking about what does future space look like? What does a university look like 10 years from now? And I can promise you that it looks quite different than it will look like today. So let me sort of set the stage and keep myself grounded on my notes a little bit. So what's the ask today? That's always important in town halls like today. The ask is to get your feedback around what you think are core components to a campus of the future. So that's a little bit broad, and then you'll see it. I'll narrow that down a little bit. It's also really important to acknowledge up front that we have a lot of expertise around creating a campus of the future in this room and across our community. So, of course, our folks in the Faculty of Education are looking at issues like this all the time. How do you engage the learner? How do you embody the full student, etc.? Our people in offices of student life are looking at this the whole time. And of course, we have many professors and staff in the room who are doing so and doing a remarkable job. So really, it's largely about how do we tap our community and set a bold trajectory to say, this university wants to be on the cutting edge of what a campus looks like 10 years from now. And Craig was quite right in stating that a campus is far more than bricks and mortar. It's a virtual space as well. So we have to think about how we're going to simultaneously occupy a really important virtual space, which will take up more and more of students' life. But the crux of a great campus has to be what happens here physically. Because really at the root of that argument, if you think about that, if we don't believe that the magic happens on campus, and we'll talk about flipped classrooms and other venues where you talk about, and discuss really important issues here, then we might as well fold up our tents and say, all education is online and it's all about digital and it's all about technology and how do we make it better. I don't believe that. I'm not a believer in that, so you know where I come from. I'm very much a believer that the magic happens on a university campus. How many of you here best time in university, I'm going to steal this from our provost because he had a really good suggestion. He asked this question. When you think about your time in university, do you think about your time spent in a classroom like this? Not a lot of you. So the point there, of course, is that when we think about what did we love on campus, I think about the social moments, I think about having fun with friends, I think about varsity games, I think about being part of something that was much larger, I think about the experience of kind of growing up on a campus and what that meant. You look back on that fondly. That, I think, has to be in the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about what does a campus mean to students as we move forward. So at the root of my own passion is this question: how do we better engage our students in their pursuit of learning? Which is a pretty basic question, but as time goes by, that's becoming more and more complex to solve. How do you solve the learning puzzle so that we're really giving students value added? So I think most of you probably know, I've said it many times, that the sage on the stage that we're moving away from, those days are really over. And the days of having an embedded campus where we really understand that the role of the professor turns into one of a facilitator. We're facilitating knowledge, we're translating knowledge, we're working in our labs, but it really isn't about content pure delivery. If it was really about pure delivery of content, there probably isn't a subject that we can name today where I can't find the best content online for that subject if all I want is pure content. Again, the magic is about what do we do with that content with our students and how do we engage them. So it's clear for most topics, as I said, that we need to do things differently. So we do see things like flipped classrooms. And flipped classrooms are a great initiative. How many of you know exactly what a flipped classroom is? So flipped classrooms are when you flip the format so that, for those who don't know, so that the lecture is usually done digitally, where students can watch it at their own leisure, and then they come to class to talk about course material and are guided by the professor around their learnings, where they take an active role in teaching themselves along with the professor. So variations on that is what we mean by the flipped classroom. So that's one avenue of doing things. We know we need to better integrate technology into our content and delivery. And we have reason to believe there's value in that human interaction that I've been so desperately talking about. So how do the answers inform our question of what our campus needs to be looking like physically and virtually in the next 10 years? That's where the rubber meets the road, right? Because the reality of our campus, if you look around, or in a classroom, what does this space turn into? How do you do a flipped classroom if this is your classroom? It's tough. It's not impossible, but it's tough to do. So what do they look like? So embedded in that question are all sorts of narratives that we could talk about. How do you move a campus from A to B? We're not going to get rid of this room, so how are we going to utilize it? What are the best classes to have in this room? And what are we going to do in other spaces? So that we're thinking through a 10-year plan of how do we transition to different spaces, and then how do we start to think about renovating old spaces as they become older and older. Most of our spaces are now about 15 years old. And so, over the next few years, there is an opportunity to rejuvenate those spaces, okay? I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Okay, so we need your input into this strategy because you gotta get the strategy piece down first. This is where I should have welcomed all of our folks online. Sorry, I didn't do that. So the strategy piece is really important to nail because where we can go is a lot of people go to tactics right away, right? And you'll hear people say, you need movable furniture, you need all these different things, you need partitions in walls, etc. And I believe you do need all those things, but until you have a strategy, those are kind of one-off tactics that don't really serve us all that well. So if we can keep the discussion focused as much as we can on strategy, knowing we will have a tactic discussion, right? Like, the furniture is important. It's crucial to what kind of space you want to create. But firstly, you have to say as a campus, yes, we agree we want to move from A to B, which is what I've heard from you. And how do we do that? How do you transition that over time? The truth is that a lot of campuses, as you know, are doing that right now. They're in the midst of this same transition. But nobody is really learning from one another. So I would urge us, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's learn what really good universities are doing in this space. And sometimes copying is the best form of flattery. So if somebody's got it really right, let's think about doing it that way. There are other things that, of course, have to be cultural specific to our institution because it has to look and feel like us. So let's be thinking about that. A big part of experiential learning, a big part of this whole move towards a new sticky community is how do we enhance experiential learning, right? That's a big part of the future. So we have like the education makerspace, we have Crime Scene House. If you think about those spaces, that's what I'm talking about. When I go there, I sense the magic that our students are feeling, right? They're learning in the moment, they're learning by doing. That is the future of where education is headed, and we have to be better positioned so that our buildings can reflect those kind of spaces, or we're thinking about how do we create more of those spaces. So keep experiential education in the forefront of this whole discussion. And a sticky campus to me, of course, besides being where people want to stick around, ask questions like, the library is generally a congregating space on every campus for students. How does our library need to be revamped is a question. What are the best food options? Who thinks we have the best food in Ontario on our campus? I was pretty sure of that one. But these are the little things, having a 16-year-old, these are the little things that actually go into young people's minds when they think about where they want to go and spend 4 years of their lives. So getting the little things correct is really important. That's a coffee shop and a pub that has live bands and stuff. I mean, a lot of us went to universities where that kind of stuff was important to us. So I'd really like to see that kind of things. You've seen investments in varsity and intramural sports. So the reason those things are happening is because amidst of this has to be a focus on the student experience so that we're always being guided by how is the student experience really being improved by the spaces that we're creating such that they think remarkable things are happening here, really cool things are happening here. And that includes thinking about our labs and our lab spaces. In many areas we have labs, of course. Students get so much out of those labs because it's experiential learning. But we also have to think about the whole notion of owning a lab, right? And now I'm getting into taboo land, so I gotta be careful. But it's very true. Like the traditional view of academics was, you get hired, where's my office, where's my lab? But that's not a sustainable model. And so what is the model of the future? If we have limited space, how do we share labs? What does sharing labs look like? What some of you know is that a lot of universities have gone to resource-based budgeting. And those who have, and we aren't going to, at least not for a while, under my watch, because it creates real divisions. But what happens in those situations is that people get rid of space so fast because space is now a cost to the faculties and to others. And when something's a cost, you minimize your costs. So what you see in there, the reason I bring it up is because you see some really creative uses at some institutions that are actually quite close to us around how they're using laboratories, how they're doing things differently, not because they were initially thinking about the student experience, but because they were forced to around a system of how do we minimize costs that I think are still really valid for the student experience. Because it doesn't do anybody any good to have a whole bunch of faculty who are new, excited, energized, and who are told, sorry, you don't have a lab just yet, but when person X retires, you might get one. That's not a great situation to come into. So I know it's kind of taboo land, but we got to get into some of those things. because it's going to be thorny to sort of figure out exactly what the future looks like. It's thorny, but it's very, very doable, and it's very, very exciting if you think about what we're talking about. Let's lead where education goes 10 years from now. That includes the downtown space. So do we have any downtown folks come up today? There we go, we got a few. So we got to think about our downtown spaces, working collectively with community as we do. We've got a few good pubs down there and coffee shops. Why aren't we partnering more to get our students into those spaces? Why aren't we thinking about, what happens in those spaces? Why aren't we, there's a whole bunch of solutions. And I know we are thinking about some of those things, but everything should be on the table in terms of how we not only rejuvenate this space, but the downtown space. So this is the time for solutions. How do we transition away from lecture spaces, especially tiered ones like the one we're in, so it's really important, and ensure that only subjects that have real scientific reasons. That's the weird thing about academics as well. What we always do? In our own research, it has to be all evidence-based. In our daily lives of teaching, sometimes we get caught up in arguments around, well, we've always done it this way. Let's use evidence to say, well, what should be taught in this tiered format for the transition period? What are the best subjects? What does the literature tell us? And let's be informed by that, rather than just saying, it's this class, it's that class, because we've always done it that way, or that's the largest. Even then, as I said to you earlier, what do we do with this kind of seating will become important. One of the weird things I do around the campus, just give you one of my secrets, is I go into classrooms when they're empty and I think about how are we going to reconfigure this, right? It's a daunting task to walk around our campus and think, what do I think a campus will look like in 10 years, maybe less, that's very student-centric, that involves students coming in and owning their own education, where professors are facilitators. What does that look like, and what do we have now, and how do we get from A to B, right? It's a very, very important dialogue that has some thorny questions that we'll have to sort out. So we want to move away from the ownership model, like space is something that we own, and moving towards utilization and saying, does this make sense for learning? Are the most students in that space that could be to maximize learning? And if we put that lens on, it dramatically changes the discourse. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. I think, I've gone well over, but that's okay. This is a very good discussion. And I would just say that, one of the pieces of evidence that's quite different from campuses that I'm used to would be, take a look right now as we're in summer session around how much space is being utilized everywhere on our campus. Walk around our whole campus and see how are we utilizing it. Right? How will that mesh up with the future when we think about the lifelong learner? We want to bring people back onto our campus who want to upgrade their skills, maybe don't want a whole degree, but want modules and modular education. How does that look? And I see the lack of utilization this summer as a symptom of a deeper issue around sort of the traditional academic model of September to April sort of fixation. And I'm not blaming anyone for that, but I want us to at least be conscious that that's going to go away. That's way too expensive and way too ineffective, right? Let's put costs over here. It's just ineffective. We've got all these spaces that are just sitting empty, and now we're going to create great spaces. We can't have them sitting empty either. So we need to think about, trends and get ahead of the trends. If lifelong learning is something that universities want to play at, and we're on the precipice of losing that market to other forces, then we have to start thinking about utilization in times like summer when other folks are thinking about, working people are thinking about, I wouldn't mind coming back for a 4 or 6 week course if it fit my schedule, right? So it's what's the student of today look like? What's the student look like in 10 years? But what does the continuous learner look like 10 years from now? They're already flocking to things like Athabasca and Royal Roads, et cetera, in Canada, trying to find degree options. They're not looking, as they could be, at institutions that are really poised on a trajectory to, like we are, to be an incredibly well-known institution, much more than we are now in 10 years from now. So the vision is, how do we get there, and how do we get your input around what you see as core components to a future campus? So thanks for your time this morning. I really appreciate it. Brad.
So I'm going to give you 90 seconds to compose your thoughts, your comments, your discussion topics. And what am I going to do during the 90 seconds? I'm going to describe a picture.
Should I stay up here too?
The president talked about what does the next 10 years look like? What is your vision? We have a campus master plan that talks about the 30, the 50 year out for both the north and the downtown location. But we concurrently are talking about what is our next building. So right here you see ERC. Next summer, we plan on moving the U5 portable into the Founders 2 parking lot for 2 years. Thank you, Student Life. And we will start to build a new building with a future vision afterwards of building out further the flip of the library and starting to think about your comments today are helping us not only think about what goes into this building, but also into the next, and what we think about of renovations in the future buildings. To that end, as I mentioned earlier, I have people in the front row who are working on the design team. We have health sciences. We have the CFO and his space planning OSIS team, student life. We have USU executives, I believe, here, although the USU president wasn't able to make it. We have in the back? Thank you. We are going to be working with them to look at what is it that they have as their needs within the next building. But now I want to turn it over to you to talk about what are the strategies, what are the things that we should be thinking about, and we will be listening to where you think we should be going. And I encourage not only the comments, but also discussions, because what we found when we started talking about the teaching space of tomorrow is that not everybody agrees. One instructor wants the tiered classroom. Others want active-based learning. So I encourage discussion today. We do have our people online. We'll be getting some online questions potentially. We're able to take them. Stick up your hand. We need you to speak into the microphone so the people online are able to hear you. With that, I open it up to you for your comments, your strategies.
So people who know me probably know a little bit about what I'm going to say, but I really hope that we can start balancing self-care and the ability to manage in a very messy world once you become a content expert. I think a lot of times we're focused very much on content, on skills, and yet we know from employers and from talking to graduates, they have a lot of difficulty managing when they get out to the world of work, and it's not around content. It's around managing life and what happens in life, and I think as a university we could take a lead in balancing self-care with content expertise so that they are successful when they enter the world of work.
Thank you. It's almost like I knew when he was going to say something. I have in front of me 3 key points that comes from a person from Australia that has done research on the sticky campus. Solutions must be pedagogically led. Solutions must be active, collaborative learning. And the notion of well-being leading to better productivity, better learning is essential.
Just when asked what I remember, I do remember student lounges and sort of feeling like you have a home away from home or a place that you can sit down and relax, and very positive memories of experiences. But it also made me think of the universities I went to that invested in that versus those that didn't. And I felt that it invested in my experience.
Thank you, and I saw the head nodding from our USU executives up there with your point.
Thanks, Joanne. Brad, a couple of comments, and Wendy and Jennifer's comments kind of spurred this. A number of years ago, there was a conference held at the University of Alberta, and they created what was called the Edmonton Charter around constructing healthy universities. And that was updated in, I believe, Kelowna about 2 years ago. UBC Okanagan hosted a follow-up conference, and I think we should really take a serious look at the concept of the healthy university. But on a higher level, I was thinking about this. I think we should envision at a very high level that we're part of a Simcoe Street corridor, and that corridor ties together our various locations. But along that corridor, we also build in other facilities such as the hospital, which is a key player for a lot of us. And there's a lot of institutions down through that corridor. There's the Durham Region Workforce Authority. There's lots of businesses. I really think we should look as an institution to build ourselves around that corridor to the nth degree. And just while I could keep going, and I'll probably put these in a list too. But I think I want to speak up based on my experiences about the value of varsity athletics, but varsity athletics underpinned by a very strong intramural program which is accessible for every student on the campus. So think about the varsity athletics as the graduate program of physical activity and the intramural athletics as the undergraduate program with experiential learning built into the intramural piece.
Awesome, and if I pull from someone yesterday that talked about the continuing education part of that would be, we want to see people out on Polonsky Commons playing the flag football. We want to see those unscheduled events as well. You know I'm with you.
I like that treading on the taboo notion of space. I think it's really important to create space for all of faculty and students to be together, to create those synergies and those collisions for idea generation and to walk the walk that we're teaching, I think is really important. So large spaces, visual spaces, spaces for everyone to use together.
I love that word, collisions. We want to have
Synergistic
faculty.
collisions. I may have stolen it from another university.
We heard from the president that is encouraged if it works somewhere else. We're going to make Joanne run over to the other side here, I think. I'm coming. The people watching the video just saw someone flash across.
I'm not sitting beside Doug anymore. When I was at university, there was two places you could collect. One was with your own department and the friends that you went to school with, and then the other one was the larger university, but both were important. So not just a big collection space, but individual as well, inside your departments or your programs, actually programs. Okay.
Hi, Leslie from Student Life. One of the things I think when the question was posed, where were most of my best memories from my undergraduate education, I think largely of it was like a large event space / lounge. It was kind of an open space in a high traffic area, and I feel like the center of the community really kind of took hold there and spread to the rest of the campus. So I'd love to see a large space where you could hold, interesting, free-flowing events at the same time when things aren't happening. Students feel safe and free there to use that space for their own purposes.
I love 2 points there in the sense of the large open space. I love the comment on the safe, but picture this, again, not getting into the solutions, but thinking about the future. What if we are able within here to make a large, this is our front door, this is our common area, a large common area that can fit 300, 250, but you know me, I can't have these atriums that are not being used. And so there are divisions from the ceiling that can come down nowadays. What is the technology? What is it that we can use today to solve these issues? And so from 8 o'clock, it's split into 2 rooms. At 11 o'clock, it's split into 4 rooms. And then it's back at nighttime for that event space. What are the things that we can do for technology? Noting that right now, we are not talking about cost limitations. Just right now. I have a feeling I will hear about that after. Sylvie.
So I'm thinking of my experience at Laurentian University, and I was there as a staff member, not as a student. But while I was there was a lot of transition that happened with the senior leadership team, where they used to be in the Ross building on the 13th floor. And the incoming president and a lot of the senior leadership team recognized that they needed to be closer to the students. You know, they needed to be able to walk out of their office and visually see the students and visually see the experience instead of being in that ivory tower and not really experiencing what the students are experiencing.
Agree. Oh, good, Jill. I'm happy you say something.
Okay, you probably all know what I'm going to say too.
You might be surprised by my answer, though.
So, I mean, I know we're working on this with the President's Reconciliation Task Force, but we need to have Indigenous representation inside and outside of the campus. So, looking at that building, say perhaps at the entrance, we need to have some kind of a really cool sculpture or something acknowledging the land, or I don't know, something along those lines. But we need to think about a space for Indigenous students and non-Indigenous students, you know, just as working towards reconciliation, and also a place for them to feel, you know, like it's like home to them. I know we have the center downtown, but we desperately need something here in the north. Miigwech.
I absolutely agree. Ken and I were recently talking, you know, this is just, you know, simple drawing, but what does it look like by having different designs that ingrain those concepts as you come in and see? So absolutely agree with you. Susan.
Hi. I think what I'd like to see in buildings, and don't forget, I've been here since before we started, so is some flexibility in future use, so that, for instance, your wide space that we could use for events, structuring the building so that if we need that space later, the infrastructure is there to do that, you know, perhaps when we open another space somewhere else, because that is something that, you know, as all of us have lived with heating and ventilation issues, that's something that happens when you redesign a building. So that kind of, taking that into account, I think would be.
Absolutely.
To me, it looks like a nice, big, beautiful building. But looking back, of my experience was being away from home and being in a place that was huge and not knowing who to go to. We had mentorship programs or big sister or big brother things. It wasn't mandatory, but there was somebody that we could go to talk to about being in this big building. And sometimes if you look at the attrition rate of a university, it's those individuals that should give you some feedback as to why they've left. And some of it can be loneliness in the huge, beautiful building.
Right, as we talk about the strategies, I think that's such an important part, and the president noted this, right? This discussion is not just about the building, it really is about the people in the building. What is it that's going to bring you here? It's those peer mentoring sessions, it's working with your colleagues, it is having those two researchers that bump together in the hallway and collisions, thank you, and come up with that new idea that's going to solve the problem of tomorrow. I think we can stay up there. Yes.
Hi. So I want to share a survey I saw on Facebook where someone posed a question. If UIT should, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. I wanted to share a survey that I saw on Facebook where someone posed a question on whether UIT should have a vertical farm on campus to for research purposes and to supply local organic products. Over 178 people said yes, this is something they would want, and 5 said no. I think this would be a great idea for the research aspect, and UIT is, and the green community. UIT is an environmentally friendly school, and it would be a great space to create a nice study space for students. and the local organic produce could be good. Maybe we could sell it in the market, have more variety for vegetarian, vegan students here, or just people who in general want to eat healthier.
And I love that, pairing that with Lori's comment on the fact of this is not just about us. This is how are we part of the larger community. I know Jared has one up here.
Hi, I'm with Mental Health Services, and we have been pondering upon the idea of opening a peer-to-peer counseling center, and in the existing U5 area, that's impossible. We don't have enough room, but this new building would create a beautiful opportunity for that. We already spoke to our partners from the Student Association and Student Union, and we got an enthusiastic go-ahead nod from them. So we would be hoping, building on the comments from here on having student lounges, hanging out places. We also would like to complement it further and have a space for peer-to-peer counseling center. That's also opportunity for experiential learning. We would hope to collaborate with our friends from Social Sciences and Humanities and Faculty of Health Sciences as well. And I would like to put it on a table that's our thought and our hope that part of that building could be dedicated for that purpose.
And I love how he talked about, noted it was here, but also noted about working with social science and humanities. A lot of things that we're hearing today is not just about here. What are we able to do downtown? We have the first floor of 61 Charles that now is opened up, that we are starting to think about what can we do there? How can we integrate student life, the faculties, and the library together to create that learning and research space of tomorrow? So it is about more than just this area. Hi.
As I think about my best experience at universities, I also think about ones that I disliked.
Yeah.
Was being in rooms like this with no windows or natural light. And as much as I like the Cirque building, I'm also surprised at how small the windows are in some rooms. And I think there's an opportunity to, throw back the curtains and just let light in everywhere. As a staff member, looking at the picture, my first question is, where's the entrance to the underground parking lot? Then my thought is, where is the entrance to the transit terminal? Why isn't there an underground space for the buses to come in? Why do our students have to walk to DC to get the bus? Why isn't transit integrated into this area? A final thought, sort of being selfish, is that as a staff member, I want the best possible work environment in order to deliver the best possible services to our students. So as much as we're focused on the student experience by making staff happier, by providing them with the best facilities to do what they do, will strengthen the student experience.
Absolutely. When I talked and Wendy talked about that space of well-being, we were not specific on student. Totally agree. Faculty, staff, student, people is what's important.
Underground parking. Underground.
For those that are wondering, if you look at the campus master plan that goes out, we do have underground parking shown in the pictures. We do have the transit. Unfortunately, the waterways do not allow it. And as an exact opposite to your survey, we asked people, would you be okay with spending $2,300 a year on parking? And I got 99% no. So.
Hi. I was a student here a while ago, but I was thinking about social spaces that we had 10 years ago, and the UA building and the UB building used to have little, like where all the makeshift offices are, those used to be little social spots for students. And it's great that we're going to build a student-friendly building, but can we add more friendliness to the buildings that we have as well? Because
yes,
we even used to have coffee tables and chairs in this atrium, and it's not there anymore.
Yeah, again, please, everyone, remember, maybe I should take down this picture or put up a whole bunch of pictures of people to get you. This is a discussion about the future. as we think about this, what renovations do need to happen? If we're going to move people out of UA over here, what backfill can we do? And so I think that is very important. And I just wanted to use, Rupinder Brar is not able to make it today. He's right now as our academic lead within and consultant within the Teach and Learning Center. He talked about that a sticky campus starts with community. You can make a bunch of cool places, but students, faculty, and staff want to be at functional, convenient, and really areas where the community group can get together. And he started to use science and the fact of whether you're talking about the group that's going to get together as a Math 1010, 250, 500 people, or the third year chemistry student that we used to have in those areas who got together as a community group. And that's what we're trying to do, is create these community of learners. King's College has large classes followed by smaller tutorials, followed by smaller working groups, and the smaller working group is their flag football team that they then go out, and they create this community of learners. Do we finish with everybody already and we're back first, number 2?
No, anyways, I actually want to build on that one. I think one of the major issues we have on this campus right now is a lack of weekend programming. So we can talk about pieces happening all week long, but until we start filling in the gap on weekends for students who live in residence or who live away from home, I think we really need to address that. On that note as well, just one more thought. I'm not a big fan of underground parking lots, only because I don't drive. But, but I think one thing I'd like to see is that we create some campus maps with known distance routes to walk, run, exercise, and we publish that as something so that we can get people physically active around here.
A couple quick questions too. One of the big things I remember is a lot of universities have, the whole community part is you have community rehab settings. So now you've tied in staff, research, students, Lakeridge Health, whatever it may be, and you've developed from ground one through the community all the way through. I think that's a big component that we can really make our mark in Oshawa. The other side would be getting into athletics. So looking at, say, different organizations with kids, Whitby Wildcats, say. They want to be on campus. They want to meet the UIT sports teams. They want to be at UIT from 6 years old up. So getting them on campus and making that something where our students also want to be active with them at practice, games, events, things like that, I think would be huge.
Absolutely. I mean, if we can get them recognizing UIT as a leading spot for everything from 6 on, they're going to be coming in. I know it's in the middle there. Hi, Mike.
Thanks, Brad. First of all, I'd like to say I think it's great that we're having this town hall. I hope we have several more on these subjects, because I think we're actually talking about, to me, 3 very different subjects: the use of this space and the sticky campus and so on, the issue of experiential learning, and student-centric learning in terms of what Stephen mentioned in terms of the classroom of the future, or whatever we want to do. I think those are 3 very different conversations. And Brad, I appreciate you mentioning that Australian study that, particularly around student-centric learning. That's an academic discussion that we really needs to come through academic council and figure out ways to do that. I'd also like to say it's very pleased to see the footprint of the building has been moved out of the parking lot. The early sketch that I saw would have been awful, having put it temporarily planned to go in there at least, so I'm pleased to see that. I'm also very pleased to see that suddenly we're in a position where we have $40 million to spend on a building when we just finished CERC, and we've been living through several years of budget constraints. And so Craig, fantastic job with the university finances, that we're in a position right now where we can actually do that. I'd love to know where the money's coming from, but I have a sense. Hopefully maybe this is Sue doing a fantastic job as well in raising the money. But as we talked about in academic council, I think it's important as we go forward that we balance the expenditures on student space, classroom space, and providing let's say office space for hiring more faculty so that we can improve our student faculty ratio. And I know we've had that discussion. Again, I appreciate that that's in the budget for next year to actually for the first time in a long time to increase the faculty complement. In terms of this student space, the only suggestion I would have is that, you know, with this money that we have, and apparently we're getting a new sports field as well, there seems to be money. I think it's very important to consider making sure that there's space in this new building for an equity and a human rights office, and funding that properly through the operating budget. And I'll just quickly, and I know Stephen, you said you're looking for solutions today. I think that's one solution. In terms of experiential learning, I think the focus really needs to be on finding placements for students off campus, less focus on paid positions, whether they're through co-op positions or internships, whatever they might be. I had this discussion with Deb Matthews, our former minister, 2 years ago, and it's clear that the ministry is looking for that, like trying to figure out how to get industry engaged to hire our students. I think if we keep trying to find spaces on campus, it's going to be very difficult. One solution might be in terms of research labs. But right now, we only, if a student gets a USRA, they're only funded 50% by the university, whereas if they get an administrative position for the summer, I believe they're funded 75%, and only 25% is paid out of the department budgets. But if we really want to get experiential learning for many of our students, and this might, I don't know if it applies to all programs, certainly in engineering, trying to find more research positions for them in summer is good experience, and it might encourage them to go to grad school as well. But again, trying to make, other schools that have big co-op programs, they put a lot of resources into making those programs work. And again, in student-centric learning, I think it's important to keep in mind what that means. Student-centric learning is about turning the classroom around and focusing on the students learning in the classroom. All these other experiential things are on campus. Sticky Campus is great, but we really have to keep a focus on what they're learning in the classroom. And if we're going to try and move in that direction, we have to make sure there's supports for faculty who actually want to do that. I've been trying to flip my classroom for the past 5 or 6 years, and there's never any support through scheduling or anything like that. Once I managed to get a scheduling change done for my course to make it work better. But those are the kinds of things that we need to put the energy into. If we're going to start to convert classrooms into flipped classrooms, we have to identify faculty who want to do that, and make sure that the scheduling process helps them and that there's other resources, because it's a lot of work to do that. So, thank you.
So many points, heard you on all. The one that I think I want to comment on is about what next. You're right, this is but one step of the discussion. And looking at what is next, there's 2 paths that are going on. The first is, as we look to the next 10, 20, 30 years, how do we continue to have these types of town halls, online virtual communities, discussion boards, where we can continue this discussion? And I'm hoping that there will be the challenge out to you very soon on what does the Sticky Campus look like. Much like Lori said, she has many points. After today, we will open it up such that we can track, today is not your only chance. What are the other things that you want to say? There's also the part about the next building that's coming up. And what we have is, over the next kind of 2 months, hiring the team, working with the design team as far as what's going to be going into that. Open discussions through September with academic council, with pop-up stations so that faculty, staff, students within the hallway were able to hear from you. I endeavor over the next kind of 6 weeks in order to lay out a few of these plans for further consultation.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
One thing that I wanted to make sure was mentioned today was I think a good community-focused, well-being-focused building is an accessible building. I think that I've worked at institutions that relied on the Ontario Building Code to define what accessibility means, and I think there's many steps beyond that we can take that don't require additional cost. But if we don't take those steps, then in the future we'll be constantly recovering and accommodating beyond a building that we can't fix. We have a chance to do it right, and if we don't do it right now, then we'll be constantly having to accommodate around that. So I think that's a really big priority, and universal design is a really great way to get at that for a space that works for everyone. On that line too, and talking about creating staff spaces that work really well for staff, I know that the trend nowadays, because space is at such a premium, we have so many staff that we need to fit into spaces. Open concept working spaces are a really big trend, but I would just encourage us to be as mindful as possible to create those spaces in such a way that staff who require accommodation or who require the ability to have quiet workspace can be accommodated in those spaces, and that they're, you know, you run into issues with people getting sick more often, people conflict arising more often, and sometimes we pay for that premium on space with lowered productivity. So I would just encourage us to think deeply about that. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the weekend programming point that came up at the back of the room. I think a really great way for us to address that is by providing storage and office space for student clubs and programming space for them to be able to take a leadership role and a controlling role in creating the space they want to see at times when our staff are less available, maybe.
Thank you. We did talk with the previous executive, and again, I see the heads nodding. Would you have anything to add on the AODA?
I'm working on it.
There's a reason why Megan's on the design team.
Thank you. In terms of this, from a student-centric lens, I'm also mindful of how equity fits into that. So I think that we really need to consider all gender bathrooms in this particular space. There are many transgender students who have to be very strategic of how they operate and the buildings that they go into, and I think that that's very unfortunate, so we need to really consider them in this conversation. I think as well, currently the U5 Portable has the Muslim prayer space, so I think that it's really important that we consider how they're going to be impacted with the Portable moving to Founders too. But I've also had many conversations with Muslim students around improvements that we can make to the prayer space, so I'd really hope that they are consulted in what this new building looks like if there's able to be space made for them as well.
And what I liked about the last two is, you know, it's about a discussion because, you know, if you make this one choice, there's 2 or 3 others that aren't happening. And so all of this is, as long as we at least have the discussion and we know kind of the pros and cons, it might not be the decision that 1 or 2 people like to hear, but we've at least had the discussion. I saw it up at the back.
Thank you. So thinking of my experience and what I've seen of UIT, I want to shed some light over the accessibility to campus. I feel that there should be some sort of discussion, like partnership with either Durham Transit or maybe UIT Shuttle, where, I mean, the conversation about underground parking and all that's interesting, but we have a lot of commuters. And I think this is something that, you know, in the long-term plan would be interesting to have maybe shuttle between campuses as well as with a GO direct, you know, route, because that was a huge issue in terms of, you know, when I was commuting, and that's changed since, but it was the problem.
No, thank you. I think, you know, the conversation I heard there, we have some discussions going on about transit and parking, and it's following up kind of on Mike's point. You know, today, I think, Mike, you talked about 3 overarching themes, but really we've had quite a few different discussion threads that are going, and I'm trying to process in my head, how do we ensure that you're informed on a number of the different activities that are going on? So I'm really thinking about how to do this better.
Hi. First and foremost, thank you, and special thanks to the university senior leadership team for being here. I know your schedules are really tight, but this is what we need on this campus, in my opinion. As someone who started here as a transfer student from UOttawa, made the transition here after seeing my brother's wholesome experience and giving UIT a second look, being able to go from just being a student into a work-study student, learning the value of what providing student services was, and having that experience transition into my end career goal, which is now as a staff member in my field of study. You know, I'm one of many stories where there's a living example that this campus does many great things, and none of that is not possible without each and every one of you in your respective disciplines. And that's where, when researching and really being energized towards this meeting, 3 things came to my mind, that many of which have been mentioned today, for this new space: multidimensional, multicultural, and a welcoming mosaic. And as our president encouraged us to do, I looked at a case study of UBC, and what they defined as their nest for their student center was as a living room on campus. And I think that Sticky Place can be that living room for us here. And 3 questions come to mind, and I'll get them right to the point, which is, how can health and student success be connected? Because our Faculty of Health Sciences does have a stakeholdership in this building. The infrastructure's connecting those 2 things. How can they connect better with mental health services? The second question being, how can infrastructure, just in general, connect people? If you look at that picture on the screen, what does it do? It connects the ERC to the library. Those are two great things. There are more resources and more people, and that should thus inform how that space, that flexible, that open space that could be multi-purpose for students, for staff members, and for faculty be of use. And then lastly, how can this building embody what makes UOYT a unique place not only on campus, but in Canada? And that goes to speak to cross-faculty partnerships, partnerships with Durham College, maybe a space that encourages information for bridge students to better leverage the research, financial, and infrastructural opportunities between there, and how basically, to speak to the collision point, I really think is a great way of saying it, can we cause information to action, ideas to action. And that's kind of what I gather from having to make this a more sticky place and looking forward to more future conversations.
Ladies and gentlemen, our future president. So I see a few hands are up. We have 1 minute left.
Okay, Brad, you have to give me the speech.
Okay, can you keep it to 23 minutes, please?
I don't want to be reminiscing, but I want to really congratulate the speaker before me. But one thing which hasn't been mentioned, and this is very a priority for this campus, because I don't know all the stats about how many women and men here, how many students we have, how many male or female, but I think we need an area. Even though we need area for every single other thing, we need an area for people for breastfeeding.
And so just before I try to do a couple of summary remarks, I just want to see if Craig has anything that he heard from today.
Thank you, Brad. Great discussion today, folks. I really, one of the things, I know my team has been furiously writing down all the comments. One of the things that just struck me at the very end was that comment about the living room on campus. I love that term. It's great. So we're going to take away the comments that you provided today. The team has already been working with the faculties and departments that are moving into the building, and we're going to keep those comments in, and also a consultative process as we go through specifically what would be in this new building. What was, I think, heartening to me today was some of the ideas we have already started to do. One of the individuals back there made a comment about the community garden, and this summer we're going to have a community garden up at Winfield Farms. So there is some ideas already in progress, but lovely to hear all these ideas coming out, and hopefully we can turn them into actions. So thank you very much for your comments today.
So as I quickly just go for the next steps, what I have heard previously in some of our consultation sessions is what next, or how do we know that we have been heard? And so some of the points I noted already, that there's a number of different tracks that are going on. I'm trying to think about how can we keep different discussions going on and keep people informed. I'm thinking about how do we take down the notes so that you see that what we believe we've captured the points, or you're able to correct us or add on to those, and for us to make comments as to here's where we are progressing towards those, or why we've chosen to go another path. And so this is the starting of the discussion towards what is the vision that we all want for our campus community. So thank everybody for coming out. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.